Hello and good morning friends, welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, in our previous session we discussed on guidance and career in education. In this series, or I would say regarding this topic, we covered guidance in the previous session. Dear friends, in today's session we would be specifically talking on counseling, and for this very discussion we have once again with us in our studios Dr. Parveen Sharma. Dr. Parveen Sharma is Associate Professor in Hindu College of Education, Sonipat. I would like to tell you all that she has almost 29 years of teaching experience. She has authored numerous books and a number of her articles have been published in various journals both at national and international level, as well as she has lots of students who are pursuing a PhD under her able guidance. So dear friends, let's welcome our guest Dr. Parveen Sharma, under whose guidance we would be discussing on counseling in detail. So without wasting any time, I would like to welcome our guest Dr. Parveen Sharma. Dr. Sharma, welcome to the EduSec lecture.
Thank you, Geetika ji. Good morning viewers and listeners. Our topic in this session will be what is counseling, what are its purposes, what is its nature, what do we actually mean by counseling. We see these days youngsters are lost and perplexed, they are confused what to study, which vocation to choose, what subjects should be suitable for the individual, and how to make adjustment, how to live in social harmony. These are the issues which are faced by our youngsters. So to solve these problems and to make the life of our youngsters a better one, they must know whom to go for counseling and what is the purpose of counseling. So one by one these aspects will be covered in this session. What do we actually mean by counseling? You know, counseling is the central and most important part of our guidance program in school. Counseling really helps the individual to solve the problems because this is the central part. All the activities and all the guidance program in the school, they help the individual to solve the other problems which are faced by the individuals. For a layman, counseling is different from a professional. For a layman, it is a piece of advice, it is a piece of suggestions, recommendations, are providing any information. But for a professional, it is something else because it is a scientific process whereby the individual is helped to solve all the problems, maybe problem of living in harmony with the social group, or maybe which subject should be chosen and which vocation should be chosen by the individual. So this aspect is really different from a layman and from a professional person. So counseling is very important as it helps the individual to solve the problems which are occurring at present, and moreover not to solve the problems which are occurring at present, just helping the individual so that they may not occur in the future. So we can say that counseling has a triple purpose, that is remedial and the preventive and developmental purposes also, because the counseling process helps the individual to develop himself or herself emotionally, intellectually, socially, and we can say to help the individual to live in a balanced way. So let us step by step proceed. What do we actually mean by counseling? Let us see what is counseling. You know, counseling and guidance, they are twin terms often used together. Guidance is an all-inclusive term and counseling is a part of overall guidance program because guidance is covering all the aspects and counseling is just a part of the guidance. Counseling is a two-way affair involving both the counselee and the counselor. See in this pic, it is good to talk, meaning by when counseling is being given, there must be some communication between the two party, because it is a two-way process. As we discussed, that guidance is overall inclusive term and counseling is a part of it. So counseling takes place between the two person, the person who is at the giving end and the other person who is at the receiving end. So when the two parties are there, counselor and the client, there must be going on some communication, so that a congenial atmosphere may prevail, and the person who is to receive the counseling must feel comfortable. Then see, let us define how the counseling has been defined by the various psychologists. There is a famous psychologist named as Carl Rogers. Counseling is a series of direct contacts with the individual, which aims to offer him assistance in changing the attitudes and behavior. See, what the Roger wants to say, that when counseling is going on, what is the aim of counseling? Not to help him, not to assist, rather helping the individual in changing the attitude and behavior, because we have to bring the change in the behavior and attitude of the learner, the person who is having the problem. So by giving the counseling, by giving the right advice, by giving the right guidance, of course we say that counseling is different from the piece of advice, piece of information, but through counseling we just aim to bring the behavioral changes and the attitudinal changes in the individual. And there is the another psychologist, Blackham, who is of the viewpoint that counseling is a unique helping relationship in which the client is provided the opportunity to learn, to feel, think, experience and change in ways that he or she thinks is desirable. All the changes, like how the individual is feeling, as in the very beginning lines I spoke to you, my dear friends, that youngsters are perplexed, they are lost, what to study, how to study, which course will be better for himself or herself, and how to make adjustment in the peer group. So these are the questions which are faced by the youngsters. So through counseling, we try to bring a change in the feelings, in the thoughts, or in the attitudes, or in the values of the learners. That is what psychologist Blackham wanted to say, that the experiences which are being gained by the individual, we have to bring that kind of changes, because most of the time we say at home, at workplace, or wherever we may be walking, we may be discussing, that these are the experience who are our best teachers, because most of the content, most of the things we learn not in the class, not in the home, but through the experiences. So our learning experiences teaches us in a better manner. See further, when we are clear that what is counseling, that this is different from a piece of advice, this is different from guidance, and how the different psychologists have explained that what do we mean by actually the counseling. So what are the objectives of counseling? Why we should counsel our youngsters, what is the purpose, what is the objective behind giving the counseling, and moreover, whosoever come across, we cannot approach for counseling. The counselor should be a trained person, because advice or any suggestion or any information can be given by any layman, but counseling should be given by a trained person, so that the counselee which is at the receiving end get the right information, get the right suggestion, right recommendation, how to move, where to go. So let us discuss the objectives of counseling. What are the principles behind it? because objectives are based on some principles. First principle is the principle of scientific approach. See, this is very important to understand by all of us that counseling is a scientific process. One need not to be get sentimental. Suppose we are giving counseling to any individual who is having a problem in making adjustment at home or in peer group. So if we become sentimental or we are not proceeding on the scientific approach and we become sympathetic, then our sympathetic attitude will not allow us to give a genuine decision, because when we counsel someone, when we give some decision, we should decide a scientific approach. We should not be sentimental, because if we become sympathetic, then our approach will not be genuine and our decision will not be honest, and that may spoil the career or the choice of the counselee who is at the receiving end. So this is very much clear that our approach should be scientific one, not the sentimental one. Secondly, principle of counseling need, because we have to see what is the problem being faced by the individual, by the counselee. So we have to keep in mind what is the need of that person who is getting counseling, not to be the need based on the desires, on the needs of the person who is giving. So we have to form our decision and our opinion on the needs of the counselee who is to take, not on the basis of the giver. Then principle of relative world. See, we are not living in a absolute world. We are living in a relative world. What do we mean by this? It means that we have to keep in mind the individual differences of the learner. So our approach should not be rigid one. Our approach should not be fixed one. One guidelines may be befitting for any individual and that may not be befitting for the another individual. So we have to see what is our target group and to whom we are providing that information, because the counselor or you are not the important is the counselee for whom we are giving the counseling. So we have to keep in mind the needs of the counselee, what is his desires, what are his needs, what are his problems, whether that can be approachable by that person or not. So we have to keep in mind that we are living in a relative world, not in a absolute world. Then principle of belief in the client's strength. This is very important to realize that we have to establish a belief in the person's strength whom we are guiding, whom we are giving counseling. Sometime the person who is receiving the counseling is already depressed, is already facing the problem, and by our words we make him or her more depressed by saying that, oh, you can't do it, this is very tough, how can you do it, this subject is very tough, this person with whom you have to make adjustment is very difficult, you can't do this. This way we are not giving the counseling, we are not helping the individual, rather we are making that person more depressed. So keep in mind, this is very important to realize by both by the counselee and by the counselor also, that we have to set a belief in the counselor's strength, meaning by that you can do, because we are not instilling the or inculcating the strength from outside, the capabilities from outside, rather we are just bringing out that potentials from within, because all the potentials, all the capabilities to solve the problems are lying within the individual. We as a counselor, we as a teacher can do only one thing, that is we can just help the individual to draw out those potentials which are lying within the individual. So it is very important to set that kind of belief in the counselee, that you have the strength, you have the capability, you can do. And the next is the principle of knowledge of self. Sometime the potentialities or the capabilities or the abilities are lying within the individual, but the individual is not aware about the capabilities of himself or herself, because he is not aware, she is not aware about the capabilities. So our duty, our responsibility as a counselor or as a teacher is to make that individual about the or helping the individual to knowing the self, that you have the strength, you have the capability, only you have to realize what are the capabilities lying within you, because now we see sometime in day to day life that you have the capabilities of going into the art stream and you start studying science subject, then your capabilities or your potential will not be utilized fully. You cannot exploit your qualities fully. So it is important at that time to help the counseling, to help the individual to realize, to know yourself, what you want to study, because we cannot enforce our liking, our choice as a teacher, as a parents or as a counselor that you have to study this subject. Rather, we have to help the students, we have to help the individual, or we have to help the youngsters that just meditate and just realize that what are your interests, what you want to become, what are your desires. So we as a counselor can help the individual to know the self. Then principle of self acceptance, I would like to emphasize more and more on this aspect, that is self acceptance. As we know that we are living in a world of competition, we have one job and the aspirants are so many, and if our youngsters want to join any course, seats are limited. So sometimes when one doesn't get the admission, one doesn't get the job, or anything, maybe unfulfilled desires, what is the result? The individual starts nagging and gribbling all the time, and this way the individual will be spoiling his or her own health, and it can be create, or that person can create a harm to the society also. So it is very important on our part also that as a counselor, as a parents and as a teacher, we must help the individuals to realize the principle of self acceptance, that one must not grumble, one must not all the time grumbling or feel a feeling of jealousy, because it will stop you from the further progress. So this is very important to know the principle of self acceptance. Then the principle of social harmony. As I have already spoken to you that we are living in a world of competition. All the time we have to face so many challenges, so many problems. We as a parents and as a counselor cannot hold the fingers of our youngsters at every step. So we don't have to solve their problems, rather we have to help them how to solve problems, because problems never ends. Till we have life in our body, we are surviving on this earth, we may have so many problems never ends, only the types of problems changes. So we cannot solve all the problems of our children, of our students, our youngsters, rather we have to help them that when there comes the different types of problems, what kind of different strategies you can adopt. So this is very important to tell our students how to live in a social harmony, because if you are a member of a group and you are not able to make adjustment and in that group, and you are not able to mold the members of the group according to you, meaning by both way you have to make adjustment. If you are not able to make that kind of harmony, then you will remain frustrated, and that will hamper your progress, and that will hamper the progress of the community and the society and the nation as a whole. So this is very important to realize the principle of social harmony. So let me revise all the principles on which the counseling depends. That is, first is the principle of scientific approach, meaning by the counselor has to adopt the scientific approach. One need not to be sentimental, because if we adopt a sympathetic attitude towards the counselee, then we are not in a position to give the honest or genuine decision. Then principle of counselee need, we have to keep in mind what are the needs of the counselee. Then we are not living in a absolute world, we are living in a relative world. So we have to keep in mind the individual differences of the individuals. We have to set belief in the client's strength. We can motivate the individual that you can do more. Principle of knowledge of self, then has to realize the self, then principle of self acceptance, then principle of social harmony. See, you have to, in this picture, that you have to develop your confidence at your own pace. We have to be empathetical, not to be sympathetic. And analysis on the basis of these definition, we have to make relationship between two individuals. Counseling is assistance which the needy persons receive. Counseling demands free expression of one's problem. Counseling acquires independent viewpoint. It is a personalized process. And let me tell you what are the basic components of counseling. One has to establish a rapport between the two parties, that is the counselor and the counselee, and there should be a good communication between the counselor and the client. And we have to make we have to develop understanding on the part of the individual whom we are giving counseling. We have to notice what are the changes in feelings and expression are coming on when the process is going on, and the counseling session and the interview strategy should be planned in advance so that we have the questions, we have the queries within us that how to help the individual who is having the problem. Then what is the nature of counseling? Counseling is different from the guidance, it is different from advice, counseling is different from direction, and counseling is different from instruction. All are related terms, but counseling is a part of the education program and guidance is all pervasive program. Advice or recommendation can be given by any individual, any layman, but for giving counseling one has to be trained, one has to be professional. There are some misconceptions that it is, it is assistance, not solution, and we are not to make the client happy, we are not to make the society happy, and it is a persuasion to change certain decisions and choices. There are different types of counseling: student counseling, individual and group counseling, vocational counseling, placement counseling, psychological counseling, psychotherapeutic counseling, clinical counseling, and marriage counseling. So these are different types of counseling. I hope all of you could understood what do we mean by counseling and what is the purpose of counseling, what are the objectives lying behind the counseling, and who should be a counselor, whom to approach, because professionally and for a layman there lies the difference, because a piece of advice or recommendation or suggestions or information can be given by any individual, but the counselor should be a trained person so that the problems of the counselee are solved in a better manner and to make the life of the individual a better one. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, viewers and listeners. In this session, we will discuss what are the purposes of student counseling and what are the approaches of counseling and what are the qualities of a good counselor. As we know that there are different kind of counseling, marriage counseling, education counseling, placement counseling, but here we will focus on the student counseling only. What kind of counseling our students requires. So we will focus first in the on the student counseling. What are the purposes? Why we should give counseling to our students? First, assistance, because our students are confused, they are perplexed which subject should be suitable for them, because sometimes wrong interests are framed by the students. They might have aptitude of different subjects and different vocation, but they develop a wrong interest. Suppose in the neighborhood there is a doctor who is very eminent, they get impressed to see the doctor and they start dreaming to become a doctor, but they don't have aptitude to study the science subjects. They could become a very good lawyer or very good poet or very good teacher, or they could go in media. So in that case, we can analyze that the wrong interest was created, was framed by the student. So in that case, while selecting the subjects or while selecting the vocation, students need the assistance. So in that case, if we have a good counselor while selecting the subject, that kind of assistance can be given to the students. So it is very important to realize that our students need the assistant. Then choice of goals. Sometimes we frame the wrong goals. So it is very important on the part of the counselors or the teachers to help the students in framing the right goals, realistic goals, because it is good to be ambitious, but when you become over ambitious and do not work hard, then that student or that youngsters can become harmful to the society and to himself or herself also. If you aspire high, you must work hard. So choice of goals, in this line of action, counselor can be helpful. Then effective relationship. There must be a good and effective relationship between the counselee and the counselors, because there should be good relationship between the two parties, that is the counselor and the counselee. Then awareness, the counselor must be aware what are the needs of the individual whom we are guiding, we are giving counseling, because always we have to keep in mind the target group to whom we are giving counseling. Then individual differences. For giving student counseling, there is important purpose lying behind it, that is the individual differences, because all the students have individuality, they are unique. Every individual is a unique creation on this earth by God, because even the no two identical twins are same. They might be different in any area, or maybe liking or maybe disliking. So we have to keep in mind the individual differences while giving the student counseling. After knowing the purposes of student counseling, I would like to focus on the approaches of counseling, how to give counseling, because there are different ways, different approaches to give counseling. There are three ways. First is the directive counseling, then second is the non-directive counseling, and the third is the eclectic counseling. First, I will discuss with you what is the directive counseling. Directive counseling is counselor-centered approach, and counselor takes the responsibility of solving his or her client's problem. See, I have spoken to you that we are not to solve the problems of the individual. We have to just tell the youngster, tell the individual how to solve the problem. But there might be different approach. In the first approach, it is the counselor centered. Here all the responsibility of deciding the course of action will be decided by the counselors, because there are some basic assumptions in this approach. First, there is a problem. We have to see what is the problem. We don't have to see who is facing the problem. There is a difference. Again, I am repeating, we have to see what is the problem. We don't have to see who is facing the problem, that problem, because when we are giving the opinion, we are giving the counseling, we have to adopt a scientific approach. We are not to be sentimental that this problem is faced by my dear one and this problem is faced by someone who is known to me. No, we have to see what is the problem, client's inability to solve the problem, and we have to see that that the person is facing the problem and he or she is unable to solve the problem. So it is my duty as a counselor to solve the problem. Counselor is competent. We have to say that counselor is a competent person, and client's intellectual capability is accepted. We have accepted that the problem is faced by the individual and the individual is incapable to solve the problem. That's why all the responsibility lies with the counselor. So that's why we say that the directive approach is the counselor centered. What are the steps of procedure in directive counseling? First, what do we see when we have to solve the problem? We collect the data. Suppose any individual is having a problem. Suppose we have a problem that a particular child is creating a problem all the time in the classroom. So we try to collect the data from all the sources, from the parents, mother, father, siblings, and the friends and the neighborhood and whosoever is in the surroundings of that individual. So we try to collect the data. What is the problem? Whether the problem lies at home, is maybe the reason that the parents have different criteria of dealing with that child. So there may be problem anywhere. Then on the second stage, we synthesize the problem. Here at this step, because when we collect the data, it is randomly collected, so we try to put it in selected heads, that this kind of problem will be coming in this head. So we try to synthesize the problem in the category wise, in the head wise. Then we diagnose. Diagnose is just to identify the problem, as doctor identify what is the reason of your illness. So in the same manner, when we give the counseling, we try to diagnose, we try to identify where lies the actual problem. Sometimes the reason may be one, then more. Sometimes reason may be we think that the teacher is not teaching well, but the problem is from the peer group, and we keep on asking the teacher to change the method, but the problem doesn't lie in the classroom. So we have to analyze where lies the problem. Then the prognosis part. Prognosis is after the identification, we try to predict the reason and the effect, then that this may be the reason and this should be the effect, or this may be the solution. Then the counseling. Then the next stage is the counseling. We try, after analyzing, after diagnosing, after prognosis, we try to give the counseling. Then the last is the post counseling stage, that is the follow up stage. In this stage, the counselor tries to know whether the ideas, whether the suggestions, whether the strategies which was given by me are helping the individual or not. If not, then the because this is the counselor centered approach, the counselor will try to adopt the different strategies. In this follow up stage, this happens that the counselor tries to know whether the strategies, whether the approaches adopted or suggested by me is helping the individual or not. Then non-directive counseling. Non-directive counseling is different from the directive one. Here the counselor counselor pushes himself or herself in the background, allowing the counselee to play the primary role in directive counseling. The primary role, major role, important role was played by the counselor, but in non-directive counseling the major role or the primary role is being played by the counselee, because here we have to realize what are the needs and where lies the problem. It will be realized by the counselee. Here the basic assumptions are dignity of the individual. Keep in mind always that the individual is having the problem, but we have to keep faith in the dignity of the individual. Always while giving the counseling, we have to respect the individual, because if we do not take care of it, the morale or the motivation or the strength of the individual, of the counselee will be really low and will not be able to heal up from the problem. Then tendency towards actualization. What we mean by this, that the individual have to realize what are my needs, where lies the problem, and what is my lacuna, what is my strength point, and how to remove my lacuna so that my lacuna, my drawbacks, my limitation may turn into my strength. Person is trustworthy. Here the counselor has to make him realize, the counselee, that you can do. So this kind of trust, this kind of belief has to be developed in the counselee, that you can do. So in non-directive counseling, as a counselor you are helping, but the primary role is being played by the counselee, because sometimes it is being seen when you give counseling to someone, then we expect that what I have guided, what I have said, it should be followed by the counseling. No, you have given the counseling, it is the decision of the person, it is the decision of the counselee whom you have advised, whom you have given counseling. He or she may adopt that strategy or not, because you are not to solve the problem. You have told, you have helped the individual that if you adopt this kind of strategy, then your problem can be solved, and you leave the individual, leave the counselee free, that you may adopt or may not, because you, in the previous counseling, in the directive, I have said that in the follow-up action we can see whether my strategies adopted or suggested is helping the individual or not. But here you have to leave the individual free and establish the trust. Then further, these steps in non-directive counseling are: define the problem situation, and client is given freedom to express. Here freedom has to be given to the individual. You give the opportunity to the individual, what is the problem, where lies the cause, and where you are having the problem. You give the full freedom. Sometime when students or any individual come to me counseling, I have seen that they complain that I have gone there somewhere else for the counseling, and after that I have come to you because the counselor is not listening to me. Then I really realize that kind of opportunity, that kind of freedom should be given to them. First you listen them, don't give your advice, don't give your suggestion, listen to them, what they want to say, what are their needs. So client is being given freedom to express, full freedom should be given to them, and you may, as a counselor, make them feel secure that I am not going to tell anyone. Sometimes first they say don't tell someone, don't tell. Then first you have to establish that belief, that trust between the counselor and the counselee, that have trust in me, I am not going to tell, and I am going to help you. So client should be given freedom to express. And positive and negative feeling, when the counselee is expressing to you, you have to notice that facial expression, that tone, and that ideas or that attitudinal changes on the face or in the body language, that when you console the individual, when you help the individual in between, what changes changes are coming in his or her tone or on his or her face. So you have to notice those positive and negative changes, because they will help you as a counselor to decide the strategy. Developing client's insight. As I have spoken to you, my dear friends, that you as a counselor are not supposed to solve the problems. Rather, you have to help the client that this is the problem, and the course of action is also will be also decided by you, not by me as a counselor. So we as a counselor have to develop that kind of insight in the client. So that kind of our attitude will help the client that, oh, I have the knowledge, I have the capability, so I can solve my problem. That kind of developing insight in the client will really solve half the problem. Then termination of counseling situation, then even half the way the client will realize, oh, I had no problem, I can solve my problem. So this kind of trust, this kind of freedom, and this kind of, when you are giving the primary role to the individual, will help the individual. So non-directive counseling is altogether different to the directive counseling. And what are the advantages and limitation of this kind of counseling? Tension is released because we have to help the individual, we have to release the tension of the individual. So when you give the freedom to express all the things, you ask the individual, you are free, you are safe, you can tell me all the problems. So that kind of tension will be released, will be comfortable. Client becomes confident, oh, this is the person who can solve my problem, and rather is helping me, that even I can solve my problem. So client is already under stress, and you are giving more stress that you can't do it, why did you say this, why did you do this. So the client was already under stress, and you are adopting a strategy which is giving him or her more stress. You have to make him or her stress free, you have to make his tension release, and you are if you are giving more tension, more stress, then it is not fair on your part. It is time, but see, it is the limitation of this counseling. It is time consuming, and counselor has to keep patience. Sometime when you give freedom to the client, you have to be very much more than required patient, because sometimes they are astray from that track, and the client or the counselee or the person who is having problem may give extra information which are not related to that problem. Sometimes the person start crying, sometimes start gribbling. You have to console, you have to be patient, and you have to ask the person time and again, be on the track, be relevant to the problem. Sometimes unrelated persons, unrelated phenomena are taken by the individual, so you have to be more patient. Then the last or the third is the eclectic counseling. Here the direction is combined with freedom as per situation demands. F.C. Thorne, the chief exponent of it, believes that it is more convenient rather than sticking to any rigid approach. In directive counseling, I spoke to you that it is counselor centered, but in non-directive, we have seen that it is the counselee centered. You have to give more freedom, more opportunity to the counselee, but it has its own disadvantage. First, it is time consuming. Why it is time consuming? How it is time consuming? Because when you give freedom to the client, sometime unrelated, irrelevant information are being provided to the counselee which are not related, and when you stop in between, then the client may not feel good, and your purpose is not to make the client happy. You have to solve the problem, you have to tell the right strategy to the counselor. You are not supposed to make the client happy. Sometime when you ask the client to stop in between, no, this is not the information I want, then the client may get irritated, may feel unhappy, why don't you listen to me sir, why don't you listen to me ma'am, then you have to be patient. So by removing the disadvantages or limitations of non-directive counseling also, eclectic counseling is the combination of both the directive and non-directive as the situation demands. It is more convenient. Here we do not stick to one approach within the same session. When we are solving the problem of any individual within the session, within the same problem can be solved by the directive or non-directive, the combination that is known as eclectic approach. Somewhere the counselor can dominate, and sometimes the counselor can give the freedom to the client. So this way, this is the combination of both the approaches. See how this eclectic approach goes on. First, establish rapport. First of all, it is very important when counseling or the client comes to you for a problem solution, you have to keep a good rapport. There must be established a good rapport between the two parties, because it maintains, it facilitates the problem solution, and you have to make her feel that you are secure here, be comfortable, I am not going to use anywhere your information. And then after knowing or after establishing the rapport, the next step is the diagnosing the problem. We have to identify the problem. What is the problem? Where lies the problem? Because the client has given you many relevant information, many irrelevant information also. So out of those so many heap of information, bundle of information, relevant and irrelevant also, you have to identify what is his or her actual problem and what is the reason, how to adopt the right strategy. Then you try to analyze the case, because when you listen to one side, you have to see the other side of the case also. As the lawyer when takes the case of any party, tries to know that problem from many sides, how it happened, the case, where how the criminal got the idea, and how to see that case from all the angles. In the same manner, we as a counselor have to analyze the case from all the angles. That is why I spoke to you, when we try to identify the problem, we try to collect the data from all the sources, from both the parents and from the teachers, from the peer group, from the neighborhood, so many. Sometimes, what happens, our data, our sample is faulty. Suppose you go to school for selecting the data, and you select 10 students in the peer group of that child who is having the problem. Those 10 students may be the enemy of that individual, you get the wrong data, or the vice versa. They may be a good friend, they will say no, the problem is lying somewhere, the individual is very good. So we have to be very judicious while collecting the data also, and we have to analyze the case. Then we prepare a tentative plan for modifying the behavior. We make the tentative plan. Why? Because it should be non-directive also. We have to give the freedom to the client also. That's why I am saying it a tentative plan, because we have to modify the behavior. We have to bring the attitudinal change. Then after that tentative plan, we come on the stage that is known as counseling, that is eclectic counseling. And moreover, not in the student counseling, in day-to-day life also, we adopt eclectic approach. What is that? We listen to so many people. Suppose we listen to 10 people for a problem, then the solution which appeals to us, we will select. In this way, the ideas from different persons which appeals to us, we select. That is known as eclectic approach. And the last step here is the follow-up approach. In this approach, we try to know whether the strategy, whether the methods, whether the approaches suggested by me is helping the individual or not. So this is the eclectic approach. And this eclectic counseling is objectivity based, there is coordination, and the client is active, and it takes less expenditure. It helps the client to regain the confidence. So that is what we mean by eclectic counseling. And very quickly, I would also cover the characteristics of a good counselor. That counselor should be tolerant, should be kind, should have objective approach, should be interested in helping people, should have perceptual sensitivity, should have personal adjustment, personal security, and opinion should be genuine. And counselor should have faith in the counseling and should help him to follow the approach of self-acceptance and try to understand the individual's problem. And the last is the counselor skill. Counselor should be skillful, should try to get good rapport, should be attentive to, should be aware to know the problem from all sides, and above all, he should have empathy, not the sympathy for the client. So that is what all we mean by counseling. And counseling is helping you smile again. So this is what we mean by all approaches and the counselor skill. Thank you very much.
With this note, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much for giving us a deep insight that how counseling is very, very important for the students who want to pursue a better career, who wants to have a good job. But when we are talking about counseling, and we have discussed also the counselor's job, his or her skills. So, do you believe that the counselor should be sensitive as well as balanced?
Yes, very well. Should be sensitive in a manner that he should not be sympathetic, he should have empathy. Before giving the opinion, should go in the position of that individual, that he or she is having that problem. So try to place himself or herself in that position before giving the opinion. But should not be sensitive, should be sensitive, but should not be sentimental, because we have to give the judicious opinion.
Definitely, all what which is in the interest of the student, that is what the counselor's role. Does it happens that the student or one who needs the counseling get attached to the counselor, and for the smaller or the big things keep on contacting the counselor? So at what level the counselor should maintain a distance so that the problem of the student is also solved, as well as the dignity, privacy of the counselor is also maintained?
Yes, you have asked very intelligent, very challenging question. That counselor has to maintain good rapport, good relationship with the counselee, but there must lie a gap, because I spoke in the beginning that when counseling is given, there should be a professional setting. If that setting is not professional, then proper counseling cannot be given. So thus that setting should not be a personal one, that should be a professional setting. There lies a gap.
Definitely this gap is to be filled, but with the idea of giving the utmost to the student who wants maximum of the assistance. So dear friends, we also help you, we also assist you in giving you the material, the educational material which you always seek for by flipping the pages of the books. So these live lectures would definitely help you out. We believe that if you have any type of question which is required to be answered, then you can mail us at info.cec cec@nic.in. We would love to solve your questions, as well as if you need any kind of counseling also, then also you can mail us, because Dr. Parveen Sharma is an academician as well as a counselor also. So we would love to give you counseling if you need. So mail us at info.cec@nic.in. We would be meeting again very soon and would be discussing on another aspects. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much.